Recording. So we had three breakout room inquiries on the table that should have been discussed in your breakout rooms. First being, what is the thesis of the text? Second being, does the thesis or the discourse discussed within the speech apply to our world today? And then finally, what stood out to you most about the speech? Who would like to share what was discussed in their breakout rooms?
I can go.
Okay.
I can just say one of the parts, correct, Professor?
Hey, whatever you like, man. It's all good.
Well, I felt like the main thesis what we had talked about was like the main thesis of what was going on, and I feel like he was trying to put out the image that the churches really weren't trying to like help out the black community. Like they were very against it, trying to harm them.
Anyone else want to add
I want to add a little
Yeah.
piece of evidence that I had. It was apart from the text. It was about how white people, like he felt like how white people would rob the black people of like when they would like I guess get the cash and everything, they would just take from them, and it just like they would feel like it was like it would show that they had no moral towards them, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Who else would like to discuss what was talked about in their breakout rooms?
Can I share like my favorite
Please.
my favorite, yeah? Okay, it was, hold on. Give me a minute to find it.
And if you could also, Leslie, provide us the page number so that way we could read along with you when you find
Yes.
it. Mhm.
I think it's this one. Let me see. I don't really have the page numbers
That's
though.
okay.
Okay. No, I think else. No, I found it. It says I was more determined really than I then knew, never to make my peace with the ghetto, but to die and go to hell before I would let any white man spit on me, before I would accept my place in this republic. I feel like when he said that, I really admired that because he was sharing his experience, like what African Americans experience in like their obstacles, you know, how it's mainly like white world, I guess. I think he said like they would they took away their liberty, and like police officers would just like search them randomly just for like to like amuse themselves. So he really like stood, like, he wasn't gonna accept like what other people were telling him, like, oh, like, you're like less than or anything like that.
Real quick, y'all. What reading did you do, Leslie? What was the name of
A letter from
it?
a region in mind.
Yeah. So, Angel, how about you? What reading did you do?
That's what I did by James Baldwin, you know.
Yeah. Everybody else, that's what y'all did too? Because we're supposed to be doing the Huey P. Newton reading. James Baldwin is for next week. Did anyone else?
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, it's all good. Anybody else read the James Baldwin also?
I did that too.
I read the James Baldwin as well.
Okay. So let me see if I could reverse engineer this thing, because my lecture is prepared for the Huey P. Newton. So maybe what I could do is just kind of go off the top and then address Baldwin, and the next week Group B will deal with Huey P. Newton. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, so with that being said, Angel, the church, that makes sense, because I'm like, I was confused.
I saw you when I had said that. I was like, wait, hold on. Am I saying something wrong? Did I do something wrong?
Okay. Yeah, nah, yeah, okay. So I know we have Carney, Patrick, and I believe Leslie said they read Baldwin. Diana and Destiny, what did you read? Did you guys read Baldwin also?
No, to be honest, I didn't read that.
Okay. What about you, Destiny?
I think I had read the James Baldwin as well.
Okay, so we'll just work through Baldwin then. So bear with me because my I don't have like sharp notes. And I'm just going to kind of just work through the pages. So what we read is from the book, The Fire Next Time, which is a collection of 2 essays, the one being a letter to my nephew, and then the second one being what you all read, Letter from the Region of My Mind. Now, one thing that I find interesting about this text, and I is dope because if you think about what we covered so far, right, it's almost a culmination of those 2 readings, right? So think about the civil rights movement, think about Malcolm X, right? And then when you read next week, Huey P. Newton and the work of the Black Panthers, that triangulation is really what Baldwin is up to in this essay, right? And he's almost predicting, if you will, or forecasting or foreshadowing the rise of the Black Panthers because of the shortcomings of the civil rights movements for some, and then the growing population, the growing, thrust and the growing interest that most African people are having in the Black Power movement, right? Due to the words of like Malcolm X and what have you. So to me, this is kind of what's going on within the text. And then also, of course, right, his visit to the Nation of Islam headquarters in Chicago to meet with the Honorable, no, he didn't meet with Farrakhan, excuse me, to meet with Elijah Muhammad, right? So these are some of the things that are kind of underpinning the text. Let me see. And then, yes, absolutely, the question of religion, right? And is religion serving as the liberatory or emancipatory force for the ills that plague the African community? And also, Baldwin has a very fecund way of assessing his surroundings. And I think one of the things when it comes to Baldwin, the writer, is his ability to witness. And you probably can't see. So like over my shoulders is an image of Baldwin, or a picture of Baldwin. And when you look at these pictures of Baldwin, what really becomes, to me, interesting or profound is his eyes. Let me try to get a better picture for y'all. Give me 1 second. Let's see here. And for me, the reason why I'm attentive to his eyes, because they're very important for the work that he does as a writer, right? Because a lot of his work, his written work, is the witness. And then even for Baldwin himself in his personal life, his eyes have a very foundational understanding for a lot of the pain that he has experienced through his father, or I guess it's more of like a stepfather, if you will. And he says that the contention that him and his father has is due to the way that Baldwin looks, and the fact that Baldwin's father used to always call him ugly and always say that his eyes were perturbed him and his eyes were ugly. But Baldwin says that he only says these things because I look like my mother, right? And so this is a way for him to not only get at me, but also belittle my mother, right? So this is the personal way that his eyes played out to affect the way that he starts to write and understand the roles of his father. But more importantly, right, Baldwin serves as a witness, right? And for anyone who's doing any type of work of witnessing, you have to use your eyes to be able to account for what you're seeing, and then be able to take what you witness, process that, and make a production out of it. And for Baldwin, the production is his writing, right? He has a really interesting musing on crime on the top of page 35. He says, crime became real, for example, for the first time, not as a possibility, but as the possibility, right? Because of the circumstances that's going on in the world around him that he's witnessing, he realizes once you hit a certain levels, once you hit a certain age, because of the lack of resources, crime becomes a necessity, right? And he feels that once you've gotten there, to avoid the pitfalls of possible crime. Give me 1 second. Hey, be quiet, I'm in class. Excuse me. So to avoid the pitfalls of crime, right, you have to find a racket. And this is what he calls a racket, right? And for Baldwin, his racket was the church. And this got him involved in the process of being a preacher, right? But again, this notion and this idea of witnessing. Another thing that's very foundational and fundamental for the witness, whatever the witness is observing, she is not tied up in that happening, in that phenomenon, right? He's from some regard removed from that happening, okay? And this allows Baldwin to make very profound analysis and insight. So yeah, he's in the church, right? But he's in the church to avoid the racket of the streets, to avoid having to be a hustler, having to be a pimp. He's not an athlete, right? So he figures, I got to get involved with something. So my bag is going to be the church. But that's not a natural, that's not a some innate desire of his, right? He's doing the church to avoid the street, right? So he's somewhat removed from church culture, right? Which allows him to have a very astute accounting of what's happening within the church, because he's not operating under the blind faith that most Christians within the Black church operate under, right? So this distance that he carries, that he holds, is useful for him. Also, when you think about the way he's able to articulate the social ills of this country, it's because he's somewhat removed from this country. I think if you're paying close attention from the subject matter that we've covered so far this semester, you know that, Black folks serve as somewhat removed from the American society, what Malcolm X called second-class citizenship, or a colonial status or a colonized status, right? So for Baldwin, he's attentive to this as well, but this allows him to make very accurate, astute, and critical assessments of the American social order, right? So this idea of being a level or a layer removed allows Baldwin to do his witness work. Let's see what else I got. So still staying on the page 35, moving a little bit further down, he says, neither civilized reason nor Christian love would cause any of those people to treat you as they presumably, wanted to treat you. Only the fear of your power to retaliate would cause them to do that, or to seem to do it, which was and is good enough. So let's kind of park ourselves with this idea of love, right? And this, what I picked up is probably not the prime example of the love and how Baldwin thinks about love and how he writes and articulates love. But it kind of points us in a direction that allows us to engage in a discussion around love. So he's saying, one, it won't be reason, and it won't be the Christian version of love. And for me, this is a critique of the Christian notion of love, because I know how Baldwin thinks about and writes about love. Let me ask you a question. What is the purpose of a mirror? This is not rhetorical, it's a real question. What is the purpose of a mirror?
To see reflection.
To show you yourself, right? To show you your reflection, to show you yourself. In a real practical sense, right? You're about to get dressed and go somewhere. You have an idea in your mind, what your outfit will look like, how you're going to wear your clothes, how they should fit, right? But you will not leave your house only resting on your idea of how you look. You're going to check that mirror first to make sure that how you think you look is actually how you look, right? So for Baldwin, love does the work of the mirror. It's going to show you your true self, not what you think you look like, right? It's going to show you how you truly look. So if your shirt is wrinkled, that mirror going to show you that your shirt is wrinkled, right? That shirt a little small and your stomach is poking out a little bit, that mirror is going to show you that that stomach is poking out a little bit, right? So for Baldwin, this is the work that love should do as well. If you fucking up, Love is going to tell you, you fucking up. Just because I love you enough to kind of make you aware of the things that you do not see. And that's a quote directly from Baldwin, right? Because I love you, I must make you aware of the things that you do not see. And that's exactly what a mirror does. So when you read Baldwin, and he uses mirrors, he uses the reflection in windows, he uses the water, right? He does these at moments where love should be doing the work that Baldwin sees that work should do, right? It's for those protagonists in the stories to be self-reflexive and deal with the true sense of who they are, right? So this is one of the ways that Baldwin complicates this understanding or this notion of love. It's not about this romantic, idealized iteration of love. No, love is something that reveals your true self to yourself. Love is something that may be painful. Love is uncomfortable, right? In the mind of Baldwin. This is what will allow the society to move better in a more harmonious place, right? In the essay prior to the one that you all read, this his final claim, if you will, his final call to action, if you will, is for the Black folks to love the white folks, right? And initially, if you don't know what Baldwin means when he says that love, you're thinking like, bro, out of all you've written about and out of all that you've talked about and been through, this is your solution. But if you take the type of love that Baldwin, the Baldwinian love, it makes all the sense in the world, right? Because it's not about a kumbaya holding hands. If he's talking about loving white people, it's about showing white people their faults, showing white people their shortcomings, showing how this white society is also impacting white folks, right? Because for Baldwin, this system, this idea of whiteness, right? This idea of whiteness, because something I always articulate in this class, right? We have to separate the idea of whiteness from people who occupy white bodies, right? Because to Baldwin, the idea of whiteness, not even all whites can ascribe to, right? Because whiteness, ideologically, is a very myopic understanding, right? You have to be wealthy, you have to be a man, you have to be a heterosexual man, you have to be Christian, right? These are very small, myopic understanding of whiteness. And Baldwin is attentive to those who fall outside of that paradigm, struggle with identifying as white, right? There's a book that he wrote called Giovanni's Room. And this is I think it's the only book that he writes at where the main character or the protagonist is white. It's a white homosexual man, and he's struggling with living in his whiteness due to his sexual orientation. So for Baldwin, he's pointing the readers to let them know that not all white people can ascribe to the idea of whiteness, right? And love should allow for those who occupy white bodies to see that there's a difference, right? There's a distinction, there's a separation between all people who occupy white bodies and this idea or this notion of whiteness. Another thing when you're reading Baldwin's work, I like to articulate what I call the pillars of what Baldwin would call white supremacy, what I will call white inferiority. Let me ask you all, what is a pillar? What is the work that a pillar does? What is the purpose of a pillar?
Hold some sort of structure up.
Holds the structure together. So think about what I'm saying when I talk about the pillars of what some may call white supremacy, what I'll call white inferiority. And I'm going to call it white inferiority because, to give you this metaphor, if I make everyone who's around me bend over in order for me to feel tall, am I really tall? So in other words, if I have to make every other ethnic group feel inferior for me to feel superior, is it really a system of white superiority, or is it really a system that's built out of inferiority or a self-identity consciousness, right? They're self-conscious of themselves. So I liken more the term white inferiority. But for Baldwin, the two pillars of this system or this structure is the maintenance of white innocence and what's the second one? Maintenance of white innocence. Hold, give me 1 second, y'all. My brain just blanked on me. Damn. 1 second. You got it really loud. I'm in class. Okay, I'll talk about the maintenance of white innocence, and then hopefully the other one will. Oh, that is the white imagination is the second one. So the white imagination is one pillar. The maintenance of white innocence is the second pillar. Let's deal with the first pillar, the maintenance of white innocence. Okay, and again, think about keeping in the back of your mind Baldwin's notion of love, right? So what white innocence looks and feels like. Amber Geiger, right? This is one example that we could use. Anybody familiar with the story of Amber Geiger? Does that name sound familiar to anyone? No, okay. So Amber Geiger is the police officer who killed Botham Jean in Texas, in Dallas, Texas, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. And this particular scenario, Amber Geiger lived in an apartment complex and she stumbles onto the wrong floor, thinking she's going home. In fact, she's on the wrong floor. So she goes into someone else's home, the home of Botham Jean, where she unloads, I want to say 5 shots into him, killing him dead, under the guise of her making the mistake of believing he was in her home trying to rob her home, okay? Think about that, right? So you walk into someone else's house, kill them, thinking that is your home, right? And during the trial, they lay out like the walk from the parking structure to the actual apartment, right? And they paint out the differences between, I believe she was on the 4th floor, he was on the 5th floor. And certain things like, well, your house doesn't have a floor mat, but his house does. So how did you not recognize the difference? The neighbor across the street from your unit, not across the street, across the hall from your unit had a plant. Botham Jean's doesn't. So how did you, right? So there's all these things that should alerted her to the fact that she's on the wrong floor. Even showing on the wall itself, right, that you're on the 5th floor, you're on the 4th floor, whatever, what have you, okay? So there's ample evidence that shows that she's in the wrong, right? But she does get guilty, but she receives the minimum punishment, right? And upon her sentencing, the judge, a Black woman, hands her a Bible and goes off of her stand as the judge to give her a hug, right? And if you watch the trial closely, it became not about the victim, Botham Jean, but about cleaning up the character of one Amber Geiger, right? And articulating how good of a person she is, or maintaining her innocence, right? It was a mistake. It was an honest mistake. She had a long shift. She worked a double. And that's why she was able to, you know, mistake her unit for the other unit. This is one example of how they maintain innocence, okay? And this is a little bit of a complicated one just because she does get guilty, but keep in mind the minimum punishment, okay? But we don't have to go there. There's several other examples that we could use, right? Let's stick with this whole idea of police brutality and how the police force maintains their innocence. And they'll tie directly into the white imagination. So what is it called when police officers kill unarmed individuals and they're able to get away with it? What's the, if anyone, let me know if you know what the legal terminology for that is. So the legal terminology is justifiable homicide, right? And what makes the homicide justifiable? What do they always say? From Kyle Rittenhouse to George Zimmerman, all of the police officers and civilians who are murdering Black folks, what is the cause? What do they say? What's one excuse?
We thought he was gonna shoot.
Yep. We thought he was going to shoot, or I was afraid of my life. My life was in danger. Okay. Now let's really think about that and unpack it. You have a vest, you have a baton, you have a gun, you have pepper spray, you've been trained, and you volunteered for this job, knowing that it will put you in potential harm's way, right? But oftentimes children make you afraid for your life. Women make you afraid for your life, right? Even men, even if the man is bigger than you, with all the tactical gear you have and all the training that you receive, you should be prepared for this. And fear should not be the cause of you to abort your training, right? But this weak ass excuse is always justifying the homicide. And this is where the white imagination comes into play. Has anybody seen the film A Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith? Anybody heard of the film A Birth of a Nation? Okay. So the birth, you heard of it? Patrick, can you, what you know about it, can you articulate it for me, just a little that you know?
Oh, I don't know anything about it. I was just heard of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So essentially this film, if you study film, if you go to any type of film class, you're typically gonna watch this film because it's recognized as one of the most revolutionary and progressive, not socially or politically progressive, but technologically progressive as far as film production, films of its time, right? But I kind of want to talk about the social commentary of the film. So the setting of the film is Reconstruction, the period where formerly enslaved Africans have now received their emancipation. They're able to do things like vote and things of that nature. And they have effectively been able to vote some African people into political places. But because of who Black people are in the eyes of D.W. Griffith, it's a very shiftless depiction of Blacks in power, right? Scenes of them literally with their feet up, eating chicken, eating watermelon. One thing to keep in mind also at the time of the film's production, Hollywood did not hire Black actors, so everyone who is Black in the film is a white man in blackface. So not only has Blacks gotten into political power, Black folks are running rampant, raping white women. So much so, in fact, that a white woman, to avoid the capture and the rape, throws herself off the cliff, right? And because of these happenings, the Ku Klux Klan must rise and save the nation, right? And this is what happens. This is the apex of the film, right? The Ku Klux Klan rise in and they save the country. Interesting enough, the song that's played when the Ku Klux Klan storms the town and brings back white power to the town, right, is the theme from Star Wars. Interesting tidbit of information. But I bring this whole movie up because this movie largely insinuates the white imagination, because this movie went on tour all throughout the United States. It went on a 3-month play at the White House, right? People within the White House would watch this film and invite other people to come watch the film for a 3-month period. And this largely determined how everyone viewed Black folks, right? In other words, Hollywood, by and large, is the embodiment of the white imagination. When I was growing up as a kid, the films that were out, the Black films that were out, Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, Colors, South Central, right? So all of these films depicted a menacing version of Blackness, a version of Blackness to be feared, right? So you fast forward to 2020s, and this idea of, oh, I shot because I was feared and afraid of my life because of this Black body, it doesn't even get second question now, because we have been socialized to understand that Blackness is something to be feared. right? And this is the work of the white imagination. It created that fear, right? And yes, it's by part of their imagination, but it's something there because it's a guilty conscience, right? It's the fear of the get back. They don't want Black folks to try to get revenge for what was done to them. So they're in a constant state of fear, right? And that constant state of fear informs their imagination, and it causes them to do these very peculiar things, very frightening and terroristic things. So this is where the white imagination and the maintenance of white innocence come into play. And you see this play out with police brutality, right? Because the imagination says, oh, I was afraid. I was in danger of my life, right? And then the maintenance of white innocence says, well, that makes sense. So that homicide that you did is now justified, right? And for Baldwin, these are the pillars that hold up this structure that I call white inferiority, right? So I'm gonna leave my notes at that. I want to say the majority of you, maybe except Angel, I'm not sure off top, Patrick, I'm not sure, and Leslie, far as your fishbowl, do you know if the three of you, have you gone twice or not? Because I don't know off the top.
No,
Going
I
on.
haven't gone twice. I only gone one.
I need one more.
I think I did one.
Okay, so I would suggest you three do your fishbowl now, and then that way you're done for the semester. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
1 second. And then today's the 27th. So we have Leslie, Angel, and Patrick. And you could talk about your breakout room conversation. You could talk about what you wrote in your journal, or you could talk about the notes that I just offered. All that's on the table. Whoever would like to start, it's on you.
I'll start. I'm gonna talk about what you said. Some parts, but then when you were talking about just above the Christian love, white people in this country will have quite enough to do in learning how to accept themselves, how to accept and love themselves and each other. And when they achieve this, which will not be tomorrow, maybe very well be never, I don't know if I could say that. Well, the African American problem will no longer exist for it, will no longer be needed. So like what he was trying to say, or like what he's saying, is that like, it's mostly like the white people not really um like loving themselves or like accepting themselves, right? Like a problem within, like, because it makes sense, like what you were saying, how, white supremacy and all that, it makes sense. And also going back to the Ida B. Wells like documentary when they were lynching, it was also because they wanted to not be respected, but they wanted to be feared. They wanted to make everyone else scared of them, right? And it was like a problem that they had within themselves, because I think it's a problem that they have within themselves, because like to kill people, to like harass people, assault them for like being different, it's something that like shows that they aren't like, they don't feel, well, it's mostly them, not the other people. You get me? I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, or like it's coming out how I want it to, but
I got you, Leslie. You
yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay.
I'll go next. Professor, can I touch on what you were just talking about this whole like the whole policing?
Mhm.
So that I don't understand how that happens and stuff like that, because it's true, like they go through, how you said, they go through so much training and everything for like cases of like that can be even worse than just a one-on-one situation. They got all this stuff. Other than a gun, they got a big old satchel around their waist that has tasers, taser, how you said, the baton, everything, all these other little weapons that they can use. And about the whole Which situation was it? I forgot the last one.
Amber Geiger I was talking about?
No, no, but you mentioned a name, the Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah.
That one, it's like if anybody of color was in that situation right there, anybody else that was not him, life for sure.
Yeah.
And it really sucks how this color barrier around the world right now, it's just like it just continues. We always think like, oh, we're gonna get close, we'll manage one day, and finally like break. It's like the hard truth is like it's always gonna be around, which really sucks. One generation passes on to the next passes on over. It just really sucks, you know. And being of a kid of color, I've grown up around it and everything. Of course, I'm a Mexican, I'm a Latino, but I've hang around. Where I got raised, I was around African American, Mexicans. I've been around every ethnicity, everything, and you can see the difference. I've hung around Asian, white, everything. I've hung around with my African American friends, Mexican friends, and it's just two totally different worlds.
So
In my
just to clarify, Andrew, because
yes.
culturally there could be different worlds, and that's not a problem, right? That's okay.
Oh no, but I'm talking about like just the way one side gets treated and the other side gets treated.
Gotcha.
I've been around it. I've been the one that stands out and everything. And it's like, oh, like, you know, like it's not off because they never made me feel off. That's what I'm glad about. But it's just like you can see the difference in how both groups get treated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to add on to that because it's like something I would say like I am about, and I'm not for it, but it's like something that I do care about because it's like it shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't be losing lives over something like this, having riots, anything like that. Which honestly, they weren't riots; they were honestly peaceful protests that turned into riots because you get people, you get officers on stand, you get all that. Everything was peaceful up until you started bringing that, you know. So that's just my thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to take you back to your Kyle Rittenhouse after Patrick's.
Okay.
One part I found interesting about the text was the whole part with Elijah Muhammad and like how Islam had like an influence over like the Black community, like in his like, and he explained it like how like time is like a powerful force and like how over time people sort of like resonated with this message a lot more because of like the oppression from like the white god and stuff. And like a quote that stood out to me was the white man's heaven sings a Black Muslim minister is the Black man's hell. And I just found that whole concept interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, right? Like quite literally, one can argue that the quote unquote white man has built his heaven here, right? And how has that played out for African folks? It's hell, right? And to me, that's more of a literal heaven and hell than the one that's talked about in the Bible, right? But I do want to circle back to the Kyle Rittenhouse example that Angel brought up, and for this reason. We might have talked about this before, but who were Kyle Rittenhouse's victims? What ethnic makeup were they? Does anyone
Were they
know?
white?
They're white. They're white. So this to me is very interesting because when I seen this happen, when I seen who the victims was, the question of whose lives matters popped into my head, right? Because in this particular circumstance, we have 2 white lives. Well, actually, like 4. The 3 who were injured and then the shooter, right? And I was like, who will the state apparatus align themselves with? Will it be the victims who were advocating for the value of Black life, right? Or will it be the perpetrator of violence, the terrorist, right? Who drove across 2 states to enact murder, right? But we know from the readings in this course that to align with for a white body to align with Black Lives Mattering is going to ensure, it's going to ensure the elimination of that white body, right? And you've seen that the priest who got killed, ran over, bulldozed in Malcolm's text, right? The civil rights activists who were murdered in the Kwame Ture reading that we've read, and then these 3 individuals who were organizing and assisting with the Black Lives Matter movement who were harmed and murdered by Kyle Rittenhouse, right? So your white life will matter until you align your white body with the lives of Black folks. And once you make that alignment, you don't have the safety, the protection of whiteness, right? This is also another example of how not all white people will qualify for the accoutrements, if you will, or the benefits of whiteness, right? Let's get a few more questions and we'll call it a day. Diana, what's your thoughts on the discussion?
To be honest, I found it really interesting, like in the story, like how you mentioned the like Baldwin's version of love like wouldn't be the Christian version of love, because like his purpose like of love is the same purpose as a mirror, like to see yourself like exactly how you are. Like I feel like that's very interesting because not many people like will tell you exactly like how things are, like, oh, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, or like, you know, maybe like try to change up this a little bit, like, or like they just leave you, like, even if you're like broken down and you're like look super ugly or like your attitude is horrible, like they'll just like leave you to the side. But like I really like the way that Baldwin described his like version of love, to show you like how you really are, and that like he loves you. Well, how you said, because I love you, I must make you aware of the things you do not see.
And for me, Diana, like as a father, right, to me, the type of love that Baldwin's talking about, you experience that closest when you become a parent, right? Because like even your significant other, just because you don't want the beef, right, you ain't gonna, certain shit you ain't gonna say. You're just gonna let that be, right? But although you shouldn't, and I'm not advocating for that, but just for the harmony in your relationship, you just gotta let it be what it is, right? But with your children, you have to kind of shape them in that way because you don't want to produce a terrible motherfucker, right? So you got to kind of shape them as the youth so that way they can grow into this functioning member of society, right? So it's your duty. So to me, the type of work that Baldwin sees loves doing is very embodied in the type of love that parents should have for their children, right? Because if you express love in that way, you're going to raise a well-functioning child, right? And if not, you may have some of the Kyle Rittenhouses on your hands. I want to ask y'all, what did you think about the way that the essay ended? He says, I believe it's, God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water, the fire, next time. What do you think Baldwin is saying about with that? God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water, fire, next time. And the name of the book is titled The Fire Next Time.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, maybe one second. Okay, I didn't really catch that, but like once you said it right now, it's just kind of like, okay, I could be wrong, but honestly, it sounds like, well, they did use like watering in a lot of like protests and stuff like that to like hose down people. And honestly, thinking about it now, then when it comes down to like riots and whatnot and like burning, buildings and stuff like that, it's almost like it's like that message is already like he already knew, like it was almost like, okay, like wash everything away, right? Trying to start like brand new, sort of say, or like, people come to an agreement, quote unquote, if there is an agreement. But that's just like, now it's like ready for the fire. Like if it continues or, you know, if it grows more, like, you know, the water is just, it's just, there's like a saying where it's like, what you just got the other day is just the smoke. The fire is yet to come.
Mhm.
I don't know if you ever heard that one, but
I haven't, but I got
yeah.
you.
So yeah, so like I think it's almost like, and like the rainbow could resemble like multicolors, you know. It really is just kind of like, okay, after that, okay, maybe all the colors stand together, and the option maybe there's like fire to be had or to rain down, you know, according to the Bible. It was really religious. So
Yeah,
and it could go a bunch.
yeah, your interpretation, Connie, is tripping me out, and here's why. That's exactly what the fuck Baldwin meant, right? That's like exactly what he's saying, because if you think about like the whole essay, right, he's talking about how Black folks are dealing with their plight and why the Nation of Islam is becoming more popular within the Black community, right? And he goes starting off talking about Christianity, and it kind of ends with the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad, right? And the metaphor that he's providing is a biblical reference, right? So Noah in the ark, right? So God is flooding the world because he does not like the way that the world is performing, and human beings are fucking up. So we need to hit the restart button. I'm gonna hit the restart button with the flood. So Noah, you build your ark, put your family on there and get 2 of each animal, and we're gonna restart society, right? But Noah, this is your last chance, homie. Like, I'm not gonna flood no more. Next time I'm burning all this shit to the ground, right? And so what Baldwin is saying with that is spot on what Carney's attentive to, right? So in other words, right, we offered the civil rights movement, we offered you nonviolence, America, and you killed our leaders. So next time, this nonviolent shit, we ain't doing that. And if you don't listen to what we're advocating for and what we're asking for, that fire is coming, right? And that fire is embodied in this individual here and the organization that he created, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. And that's why I say this is a foreshadowing of what's to come in the new move of African people and how they seek to deal with their grievances within the confines of the United States. I'll offer extra credit. I believe it's on Netflix, and I believe it's also on Amazon Prime. It's a documentary on James Baldwin entitled I Am Not Your Negro. It's a collection of 2, actually it's a mashup of The Fire Next Time and the book, which is a collection of essays, No Name in the Street. Beautifully, really, No Name in the Street is one of my favorite Baldwin texts, but it's a well done documentary. So anybody that watches that and does a journal entry will get extra credit. But for our reading, since we didn't do it this time, we'll do it for next week. It will be the Huey P. Newton reader, In Defense of Self-Defense. And this is a speech that he's delivering. It's a 2-part speech. So, but it's really short. It's only 4 pages. So please read that. Yeah, but what I will say is when I send out the readings, be aware that it will be Baldwin, because everyone else will be reading Baldwin next week, but just know for group B, you'll be reading Huey P. Newton's In Defense of Self-Defense. I don't know what's going on with this. Shit. Y'all, am I there still? Okay. So y'all know what the reading is for next week. Just be aware that you're reading Huey P. Newton while everyone else is reading Baldwin. Also know for next week, we'll be choosing the groups that you will have for your final group projects and getting you all together with those groups so you can exchange contact information. Is there any last minute questions,